Multiple deviation. A multiple deviation is going to send flow on information to multiple processes of the same class of process. Here we have an example in which the destination is a star message event. So if I create a multiple deviation to deviate to several different processes, it's going to create one process per each line that we have in a group of fields. Multiple deviations are always based on lines of a group of fields. So let's say in the source process, I have this group of fields that's called orders, and I've got three lines. One has an HP monitor, the second line has a tablet, and the third line has another HP monitor. We can deviate each one of these lines to a different process, creating a new process for each one of these lines. So the flow reaches the system task. The system task evaluates the group of fields. How many lines do I have? 3. Well, then I have to create 3 processes. 10. Then I have to create 10 processes. So we have to remember that a multiple deviation is always based on lines of a group of fields. So in this scenario, it's a 1 to n relationship. One source, n destinations. Here we can see the first line went to this process. It created this new process. So did the second one, created another process, and the third one. Here we can see another example. In this example, we have a process here, and we're going to deviate to an EM, to an intermediate message event. So we have lots of processes that have started. Here we have a process that started. This deviator deviated information to this EM. For example, these two lines have been deviated to the EM of this process. Here we have a one-to-one relationship, so this wouldn't be a multiple deviation. But let's see what happens next. Here we have another process with a deviator that deviates these other two lines to this EM. And here we have the last one that also deviates 2 lines to this EM. Now, the flow continues and it reaches the system task. And this system task is going to perform a multiple deviation to an intermediate message event. So this first deviation that we first initially saw, it's a unique deviation to this unique destination. But when the flow goes down here and it deviates back to these source processes, this is going to be a multiple deviation, and it's going to deviate each line back to its specific process. Again, multiple deviation, it's always based on a group of fields. And when we deviate lines from one process to another one, so from this source process to this destination process, each line stores internally, even though we can't see it, internally stores the reference of the process from which it came from. So when I want to configure this multiple deviation to deviate the lines back to the source process, I don't need to indicate the exact reference of the EM because each line knows exactly to what process it needs to go back from to. So we saw that in a unique deviation, if we wanted to deviate to an EM, we needed to know the exact reference. But in a multiple deviation, this is not necessary because the lines internally already know where they came from. Here we can see the configuration of the system task. All we have to do is select the type. Down here we select multiple. Afterwards we select the destination class of process. Then again here we can select the star message event or an intermediate message event. And in this case it's not going to ask us for a reference or anything like that. What it's going to ask us is what group of fields, where are the lines of the group of fields that we want to use to do this multiple deviation. If we've selected an IM, a star message event, each line of the group of fields is going to create a new process. If we selected an intermediate message event, the lines are going to be sent back to their origin process. So here we select the group of fields. Down here we've got some other options, for example, one deviation per each line or a unique deviation per all the lines of it. And I'll explain this in a moment. So one deviation per each line means that there is one deviation for each line and a new process is going to be created for each one of these lines. But if I mark the option unique deviation per all lines of, what it's going to do, it's going to group the lines by some kind of concept that I want to group them by. For example, I could say either I want one deviation per each line. This means that I'm going to create, in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new processes, or I want a unique deviation per all the lines of, and then I have to select the column that I want to use to group these lines. For example, I could select the column client. In this case, it's going to group by client. It's going to create a process with all the lines that contain client 1, create a second process with all the lines that contain client 3, and create a third process with all the lines that contain client 9. So in this case, it's creating batches, and once it has the batch created, then it deviates all the lines of that batch to one process. So in this scenario, if I would have selected this option, unique deviation for all lines of, I would be generating 3 new processes. In this case, we can also see that the return code is going to be stored per each line of the group of fields. So if I'm in the source process and I'm trying to deviate a star message event, each line is going to tell me if it was deviated correctly or if it wasn't. This is important because since we're doing a multiple deviation and it's based on the lines of the group of fields, maybe 3 lines were deviated correctly, but 2 weren't. So this is important that we don't store the return code in a general term in the panel, but in each one of the lines that I've tried to deviate. The next thing I want to do is go to my processes and show you guys how to configure this. So we had a process that was called origin. Here it is. And I'm going to delete the configuration of this system task. We're going to configure it so we can deviate the lines. We can do a multiple deviation, and I want the destination to be a star message event. So I'm going to delete this configuration and configure it again. I click on delete data, and now I click on it again so I can reconfigure it. I select deviator, function without web service. This time I select multiple, and here I'm going to select the destination class of process. It would be this one. So here we can see we're deviating to a star message event, and it says deviation based on a group of fields, of course, because we select multiple. So I need to select a group of fields. And I'm going to say one deviation per each line, or unique deviation per all the lines of. I'll just leave the first one. Okay, here we're going to deviate. I'm going to take all of these off. There we go. And I'm going to select the return code. This time we're going to store the result in a column of the group of fields. So I've got this done. In order to test it, I want to add the group of fields to the star message event. That way I can add a few lines. Okay, this button here, basically what it was doing, it was creating a line and it was starting the process. But I don't want this anymore. I just want it to start the process. And the next thing I want to do is add the group of fields here. Okay, I think this is good enough. So we can already start the process. Let me try it out, see if everything is working. So I grab the link. I add a few lines. All I'm going to do is add, for example, 3 lines. And here I'm going to put AAA, BBB, CCC. Okay. Here we don't have any deviation control number. They're empty. When I click here, it should launch 3 new processes. So I'll click here. Right now we're not adding more lines. We're just starting the process. Okay, we're good to go. This process has been triggered. Now I can go to monitoring and make sure in my destination process, I have actually created 3 new processes. Okay, here we can see the new the 3 new processes that were triggered. I'm going to open process number 5. So here we can see the flow was deviated correctly to the star message event. I can't see the group of fields because I didn't design it well enough so I could actually see that information. So I'm going to change the design a little bit so we can actually make sure that the information was deviated correctly. So I'm going to destination. I'm going to add the group of fields to the form. This way I can know exactly what lines have been deviated here. Okay, that's about enough. I'll save and exit. Okay, so this time when I enter to monitor this process and I click on the star message event, I can actually see if a line was deviated. Well, here it's not appearing. Okay, I know it's not appearing because when we deviated, I actually didn't select the group of fields. So we're only deviating the flow. We're not really deviating any data. If I want to change that, let me change that so we can see how we can actually deviate data. I have to click here on the Deviator system task from the source process, click on add fields and select multiple deviation. And now I have to map it from the source to the destination. Okay. Now we're ready to go. I'm going to try this one more time. I'll select the link of the star message event. We'll add three lines. There we go. I'll save and exit. And now I'll click on start process. The process has been started. So now I can go to monitoring and I'll see the 3 new instances. Here we can see the 3 new processes that were launched, that were triggered. If I open any of them, now I'm going to be able to see that one line was actually deviated from the source to this destination. Here I can't really see the information I input because it's overwriting it, because as soon as this process starts, remember the system task overwrites that text field. So even though I added a D or a C or whatever, this process here is overwriting the information. Now what I want to do, I want to modify this destination process, this system task here, because I want it to do a multiple deviation back to the source process. Right now what it's doing, it's deviating. This is a unique deviation, but what I want it to do is to send each line back to the source. So I'll click on multiple. I'll select the destination process. That's actually the source. So here I can filter and it tells me, okay, where do you want to deviate? To the star message event or the intermediate message event? I'll select the intermediate message event. And down here, I'll indicate that it's based on a group of fields and what group of fields it is. And then down here, the only bit of information I want to send is the line of the group of fields. Here when I deviate, I could say if I want to create a new line. No, not here. No, sorry, this is for the annexes. Okay, so the last thing I'm missing is to add the return code. Okay, now I can save and exit. This is already configured. So now the next time I test this, when the flow goes into this process, the line goes into this process, this system task here is going to deviate the flow back to the source process. I'm also going to change this uploader. I'm interested in changing it because I would like to say that this is a composition. So I'm going to say add whatever text it already has plus some additional text. Okay, so basically I'm uploading the information it already has plus some additional information because we're adding some dynamic data. So here we have a multiple line text field called deviated data. So we're adding this plus some other fixed text that we're adding in this process. Now let's see what happens when I launch the start message again. Okay, I'm going to add a few lines. I'll put here test 1, test 2, and test 3. Okay, I'll save and exit, and I'll launch the process. Perfect, the process has been triggered. Now, here I'm monitoring the derived process, the destination process. We can see 3 new instances have been created, 11, 10, and 9. Let's open number 11. So the flow entered, it went through the uploader system task where we did a composition, and then it deviated back to the source process. So let me see the content. So here we can see the composition worked perfectly. It says test 3. This is the information that we added in the source process, and all the rest is the information we're uploading in the destination process. So here in this field, we have combined information that was input in the source process and in the destination process. But here it's giving me a -11. This is telling me this line wasn't deviated correctly back to the source. I'm going to have to check why. If I'm having a problem with this line, most probably I'm having problems with the other 2 lines. Let's check. That's it. It's giving me -11. And the last process we're going to monitor is this one here, process number 9. And here we can see it's going to give us a positive number. Okay, it's giving us 157. Why is this happening? I'll explain it in a moment. The source process created 3 destination processes. It created process number 9, process number 10, and process number 11. And apparently process number 9 was deviated back from the destination back to its source, but process number 10 and 11, they weren't able to deviate back to the source. Why is this? It's because we're trying to deviate from one to many processes, and now from all these different processes, we're trying to deviate back to the EM of the same process. What happens here is in the configuration of this EM, we haven't marked an option that's called automatic reactivation. We can see it here. So what happens when the flow of the first process, of process number 9, arrived? So we tried to deviate from that process, number 9, back into this EM, and it deviated correctly. So the flow went out and it reached this personal task. Now, process number 10 tries to do the same thing. It tries to deviate to this EM and it gives me a -11. Why is it giving me a -11? Because this message event isn't available any longer. It's not available anymore to continue deviating lines to this process. So it gives me a negative number. And obviously the same thing happened with process number 11. So what I'm going to do is indicate here that I want automatic reactivation. And I'm going to save it. And we're going to test this one more time. I'm going to copy the link of the start message event. And this time it should work. So I'm adding 3 lines. I'll save and exit. I'll click on this button to launch the process. There, we're good to go. Now we can monitor this process again, the destination process. Now we know that another 3 processes are going to be created. There we go. 12, 13, and 14. Now, before, process number 9 deviated correctly back to the source, but 10 and 11 couldn't because there was no reactivation in that EM. Let's see what happened now with process number 14. Here we can see the line was deviated correctly from the source to the destination, and this time it's giving me a positive number, 166. I'll go to monitor process number 13, and here 165. So we can see that this this process is now working. It's sending the flow back to the source process, but let's make sure. Let's go to reports. We're going to open the source process. Sorry, we're not in reports. Now I'm in reports, execution. There we go. And now we can see this process. What this process did, it deviated the flow to those three processes with this deviator system task, and it stayed here waiting for the flow to arrive. And now it has automatic reactivation. That means that even though one process inputs flow into this one, it's still active to receive more flow from other processes. So I'm going to check the result, and here we can see everything was deviated correctly. Test 001, it went to the destination process, it picked up this information and came back, and the same happened with all the other lines of the group of fields. Okay, so now we can see that our multiple deviation is working correctly. We're sending the flow to multiple destinations, and we're grabbing all those lines from those different destinations and sending them to one unique EM.